A lot of exciting projects now, and we will be talking about that too.
Sure.
But I'd like to get started. I wanted to get started with you because you are sort of the oldest alumni we have in the group, and that was 1969, right? So if we don't talk about brands immediately, but just more broadly about the environment, the business environment, Columbia, business schools at that time, what comes to mind as memories?
My strongest memory is when we shut Columbia University down during the demonstrations. I was part of 15% of us at the business school actually went on strike to urge the university not to work on secret projects with the U.S. government. At the time, it was the height of the Vietnam War. So my deepest memory is 2 weeks where the campus was physically shut down, and there were at least 1,500, if not 2,000 students occupying different buildings. It was a very different time.
Right, very turbulent times.
Yes.
But somewhat also similarities to today. You know, the notion of transparency and social entrepreneurship we've heard this morning here.
Yes.
I think are also all on our minds. But I'd like to turn to branding and brands, sure. Because of course you've done an incredible job with the Coach brand, for example. And when did you first sort of hear about the term, the word? When did you think branding is really, really important in business? Can you recall that?
I can recall a lot of different things. I'm just trying to translate your question into some comments that might be relevant to the audience here. Where I would start is that I'm eternally extremely curious and very self-critical. Before I went to Coach, I spent 10 years actually in social welfare programs in government. I was Head Start and Daycare Commissioner from 1976 to 79. So when I joined Coach, notwithstanding my MBA, which I had earned 10 years earlier, commercialism was new to me. What was not new to me was a method of inquiry to try to understand how consumers make decisions about shopping and other aspects. So the first thing I did when I contemplated going to this very small handbag company was to try to understand its underlying equities. Why do people choose to buy that product? Why did they not? I quickly came to realize, of course, that a brand is a set of images and associations that people have in their minds. And so over the decades, I focused on consumer, brand, and product. And I would draw 3 overlapping circles to basically say success is really understanding where your consumer is today and where is she likely to travel tomorrow. What is it that is unique and distinctive about your product that makes it special? And what is the best way to manifest the expression of the product through images and associations? And that's brand. And at the time, I could not realize that we were disruptive innovators. Afterwards, when the language became fashionable, I read about the things we did being disruptive. We were the first American manufacturer to open freestanding stores in 1981. We started a catalog in 1980. We went live in e-commerce in 99. And we became a multi-channel brand, but not because we read about it in a book, but because consumers were telling us they wanted to be able to reach the product directly, and we felt we had an opportunity to express ourselves best if we could control the environment, the entire ecosystem. And today, Coach is about $5 billion in sales. We have over 1,000 stores around the world.
So the consumers were critical for
Yes.
the brand, right? And you had a whole infrastructure set up for understanding the consumer and acting on it.
We built one internally. We decided not to rely very heavily on outside agencies. We strongly believe that consumer insights and analytics needs to be embedded in the DNA of the company and brand, and so you can own it.
Now, I remember a conversation actually that you had with, not Shelly actually, but another head of a major communication firm. It was in your house when you hosted us for the Center on Global Brand Leadership. And I remember you saying, you know, we really need to be very, very close to the customer. Communication is one thing, but it's really about the customer. So, what are you doing now?
I'm working on early stage disruptive consumer-facing brands, where I have a laser focus on one space, accessories. Today I'm really looking at new ways to reach consumers, and two places where I'm very active, where I've been able to transfer my passions from Coach brand building. One is a boutique fitness concept called Flywheel. It's a spinning concept. We have about 35 studios, very high touch. There it's much harder than building brand loyalty with a service and an experience is tougher than if you have a physical product, because so much depends on a four-wall experience. Can I just see a show of hands? Who has heard of Flywheel? Okay, most of you. I should have brought complimentary cards for all of you. We have 7 studios. We're opening the 8th this week on Astor Place.
And you're growing with.
Excuse me? I can do that. I can also, I don't know how long the conference is lasting, but we can certainly have some, invite you. We should have asked.
Maybe tomorrow afternoon.
Is it after tomorrow?
It's finishing at 1 o'clock tomorrow.
We'll send some we'll have some passes come up. The other piece is an ecosystem that is focused on work share space for millennials. It's called WeWork, and I'm an investor, and I'm on the board of directors and spend about 20 or 30% of share of mine on that concept. So between those two brands, very busy. How many of you have heard of WeWork? Virtually all of you. How many of you have space in WeWork? Okay, about 10 or 15 of you. We are continuing to open new buildings. If you are looking for some space that is that will give you a very strong sense of community that is digitally connected, WeWork is just an amazing place. Average age is 31. We have 50,000 members. Buildings that are occupied, open more than 6 months, have a 97% occupancy rate.
So if you take these two brands, and you already mentioned, well, you don't have a physical product, let's say, and that makes it tougher to brand. But also, is brand...
I'm sorry, it's not, it doesn't make it tougher to brand. It makes it, you have to work in more different ways to get the level of loyalty that you would from a lifestyle brand, such as Coach's example.
Right. And are the customers also different nowadays than, let's say, the Coach customers you saw 20 years ago? How would you describe the difference?
30 years ago, shopping was the #1 American pastime. Remarkable. Today, it doesn't rank in the top 10. People used to spend 3.5 hours in malls on an average visit. Now they spend under 2. They used to browse with having 3 or 4 stores that they intended to look. Now they just go to the 3 to 4 stores. Shopping is no longer the passion that it was. In some third world countries, like mainland China, shopping is still up there. It's #1 or 2. The malls are extremely crowded. conversion is 1% in Chinese malls, and in the US it might be 8%.
So huge differences.
Among others, yes.
So good to have you. I'd like to bring on stage now Shelly Lazarus, who's from Columbia, graduating in 1978, right? 1 year later. And Shelly was the chairman and CEO of Ogilvy and Mather, starting in 1997, I believe, and until 2012. Is that right?
Something like that. I don't keep track of the dates.
Okay.
Forever.
Now, when we spoke on the phone last week, you said, Bernd, whenever there's something on brands at Columbia, I'll be there. And indeed, we've been together on the stage several times. And because you believe that brands is just really, really important for a business.
Yes, absolutely. I believe that a brand is the single most important asset that any organization has.
And how important are agencies for brand building?
Well, you know, it's. I remember being in a debate once with a client, and he said to a room like this, he said, I don't know why we need these people anyway. We could do this for ourselves. And the truth is, the difference, I think, and I've been watching it for a long time, is you can hire different people at agencies. I mean, these are wildly creative people who think in very conceptual ways. And whereas any organization can hire one or two of them, you know, Ogilvy can hire 20,000. And so when you need an idea, the pool from which you can draw is very broad. And is it possible to do it without an agency? Sure. But in so many instances, you can just source talent from an agency in a very efficient way.
I'd also like you to sort of step back in time when you were at Columbia in 1970. What did you learn from Columbia? Did you learn about branding?
Well, first of all, the advertising course was ridiculous. I mean, when you think about the fact that Madison Avenue was, you've all seen Mad Men, right? I mean, Madison Avenue was not that far away from 118th Street. We used a textbook that literally had cases from the 1930s. I can't make this up. Emory Air Freight was the major case. You wouldn't even know what that was.
They're classics, Shelly.
That one was not a classic, but still, it was just sort of, but this man we went through all these cases from the 30s and the 40s, and you thought, why don't you ask one of those guys from down on Madison Avenue to come up and talk about how it really was? Never happened. Never happened through the whole advertising program. But there was a great course on product management, actually. There was not a lot of conversation about brand, but there was a lot of conversation about how you position a product. And there was also, they were just starting courses on buyer behavior. That was a big deal. That was a big new trend to figure out why consumers bought what they bought.
Actually, Columbia has a long tradition by
Yes, no, that's Professor Chef, yes.
Exactly. And also John
Howard, right. I was a teaching assistant or something like that. I loved it.
The decision model, fairly rational model. And I guess emotions are also important when it comes to branding, right? Well, maybe more than rationality.
Well, people aren't rational. You know, Lou and I were just talking about it before. If you could actually predict what consumers were going to do, it would be really boring. I mean, there are a lot of people who would like that, but it's not going to happen. And so you just you make your best shot, you put it out there, and then you see how people respond. And then the important thing is that you then react and refine, shape, change, or whatever it is. But even if you ask people themselves, they can't necessarily tell you what they will respond to.
Now, at Ogilvy, you worked with major companies like American Express, and EP, and Coca-Cola, and also Ntiedo, right?
Right.
Do you want to share some examples of work that you are particularly proud of?
Well, it's not that. I brought a piece of film that I said to Bernd, I think the whole history of the way of marketing, of branding, is represented in this film. It is a film for Dove. I'm going to show it to you in a minute. It is the single most watched piece of advertising in the history of the world. Advertising with quotation marks. It's had 170 million views since it went on air. It is part of the Dove brand campaign, the campaign for real beauty. It does not have one product in it. It's just about the brand. It's a point of view about women and beauty. If you came from Mars, you wouldn't know what Dove actually made. So it's the ultimate brand expression. Unilever has not paid $1 for media. It's the single most watched piece of advertising in the history of the world. It went up on YouTube. Unilever translated it into 25 languages, and 170 million women and counting have watched it. So why don't we take a look at this little piece of film?
I'm a forensic artist. Worked for the San Jose Police Department from 1995 to 2011.
I showed up to a place I'd never been, and there's a guy with a drafting board. We couldn't see them, they couldn't see us.
Tell me about your hair.
I didn't know what he was doing, but then I could tell after several questions that he was drawing me.
Tell me about your chin.
It kind of protrudes a little bit, especially when I smile.
Your jaw.
My mom told me I had a big jaw.
What would be your most prominent features?
Kind of have a fat rounder face.
The older I've gotten, the more freckles I've gotten.
I would say I have a pretty big forehead.
Once I get a sketch, I say thank you very much, and then they leave. I don't see it.
All I had been told before the sketch was to get friendly with this other woman, Chloe.
Today I'm going to ask you some questions about a person you met earlier, and I'm going to ask you some general questions about their face.
She was thin, so you could see her cheekbones. And her chin, it was a nice, thin chin.
She had nice eyes. They lit up when she spoke. She had blue eyes, very nice blue eyes.
This is a sketch that you helped me create, and that's a sketch that somebody described of you.
So yeah, that's... She looks closed off and fatter. Sadder, too. The second one looks more open, friendly, and happy. I should be more grateful of my natural beauty. It impacts the choices and the friends that we make, the jobs we apply for, how we treat our children. It impacts everything. It couldn't be more critical to your happiness.
Do you think you're more beautiful than you say?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time as women analyzing and trying to fix the things that aren't quite right. And we should spend more time appreciating the things that we do like.
Contemporary branding, would you say?
Well, so you think about, let's go back to when I was at Columbia. I mean, we were doing the pore shot with 1/4 cleansing cream in the Dove soap. And we've gone from that to a global conversation about what is beauty. This, by the way, was instigated by a research study that was done around the world by Unilever, where women were asked various things about their usage of beauty products, actually. And someone just stuck in the question, do you think you're beautiful? Do you think you're beautiful? And the answer was somewhere between 2 and 4%. 2 to 4% of women in the world think they're beautiful. And if that is true, then we need to have a conversation about what is beauty. And so Unilever started this global conversation. You know, now you can do that on the internet, right? People from all over the world, or women are talking to each other about what is beauty. And so when something like this goes up on YouTube today, it just goes viral. I mean, it goes all over the world. Women are sending it to women everywhere. And so it's a completely different model. So that the approach is not so much product-based as it was back in the 70s and the 80s, where you put forth product claims. But it's gone to be a point of view. It's a point of view about something that a group of people respond to, form a community, and start communicating with each other. And so we can get to a whole other conversation about what do you do if you're a media company and selling time and space when no one's paid $1 for the most watched piece of advertising that's ever been created. So it is a completely different.
A really very, very nice example. And you heard the critical comments from Shelly and Lou. Maybe you also would have had some critical comments about Colombia at the time. I'm lucky. I wasn't here when we went to Colombia.
It would have been better, Bert, if you were.
All right, that's nice of you to say. Well, I joined actually in 1988, okay, and started teaching the branding course in about 1995. I also don't remember exactly when it was. And our next panelists actually graduated when I was already at Columbia. We'll have next Russell Dubner from Edelman. He is leading the America business as CEO and president of Edelman America, and you graduated in 2000, right?
Yeah, I didn't have to be a professor for that.
All right, there we go. So, did you learn anything from the professor?
I did indeed. I mean, I have to say that right here on this ground. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I came to Columbia, my view was skewed. I think at that time, people thought of brand in kind of two ways. Either you were a consumer marketer or you dealt with reputation management. You know, what you said about yourself, what others were saying about you. And it was just at that moment that the two were converging. And you had a point of view about what kind of brand are you? You know, are you a think brand? Are you someone that's going to provoke people to think differently, experience differently? And to me, I thought that was a great moment of these two things really need to converge. As Shelly and I were talking, sort of in the back and before, at a corporate level, the brand and what it sells are so intertwined now, and that was a moment when that just started to shift.
And there was a term around that time, which still is being used here and there, integrated marketing communications, right? Bringing everything together, and that's how branding had already changed from a more product feature orientation towards something much, much broader, right? And that is very relevant for your business, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for us, what we like to do is, think of ourselves as a communications marketing firm. So the part that helps a company take what's authentic and help prime the pump, but take some of the science of marketing to inform that, and doing it oftentimes in deep partnership with the Ogilvys of the world who are thinking about that, a spot like that, and how those two come together. So for us, we stay in the area that's sort of that mix of earned and social and paid amplification, but really in the social or earned environment.
And that environment, if you compare it to 2000, has that changed?
It's changed dramatically for us. I mean, I think if we look at what our clients ask of us, if we look at the kind of workforce we employ, so at Edelman, which you probably think of as, a leading PR agency, we have in the U.S. nearly 300 makers, or people from creative backgrounds. So, but they would be different than those that you would find at Ogilvy, in that some come from an editorial director from Fast Company or People, or someone from the Onion or the Colbert Report, or from an AKQA or like. And so we try and build sort of a hybrid creative network, and at the same time looked at the same in the sort of paid space, and not somebody who might be doing the TV buys, but might be looking at other spaces where you can prime the pump. So I think that the kinds of resources that we bring together, because you have to go where the audience is. So yes, we still are earned-centric, so at that center of where the idea comes from, and then you need a whole new set of teams to make sure that gets heard. We work closely with Unilever and with Ogilvy on that kind of work, and how do you make sure that it finds those different paths out into the public? So that's where we come in. And you can't just rely on earned media the way we did in 2000, because you don't have this authoritative top-down and everyone's watching TV and reading the Wall Street Journal. while probably everyone in this room gathers information similarly, the general population does not, and their belief in peer-to-peer is so much higher, and through search and the like, you have to be deep in that.
Okay, I'd like to bring out our last panelist because I promised you that we'll have plenty of time for your questions as well, so please think also about your questions. But before we take your questions, Etuk, please, who is in the health and fitness space with an interesting brand and brand name, which is?
YGstudios.com. I think that we've also gone from the earlier days to here, some almost casual as well as that. All right, so YG Studios. And YG Studios, what we do is we take the best instructors in the city and we'll actually pull them out of gyms and studios and partner with them and rent spaces for them and help them with their marketing. So it's like one brand, it's an umbrella for 1,000, smaller brands, which makes it a very interesting model.
Right. And can I also walk you back to 2002 it was?
Yeah,
right?
please.
So what was branding like then? What was on your mind at that point in time? And to compare it to this business that you're now involved in?
Yeah. So at the time when I was at Columbia, I was actually doing the management and entrepreneurship program. And so the conversation was actually around how do you start on the first company. This is my second company. And so the conversation was actually about your personal brand and the intersection with the corporate brand as well, because these were the days of, right before Zuckerberg and all the rest of that, and your story. Everyone knows Theranos now. So the story of Elizabeth Holmes got her to $450 million in funding long before everyone figured out whether or not the emperor had any clothes, right? So when you launch a business, you're really about what's your brand reputation, how do you start, and how do you turn that into something that's actually real.
Right. You're also dealing with reputation issues, obviously, but I guess what you're referring to is really the person behind the company, and that has become a hot issue in branding.
Absolutely.
It's referred to as internal branding, as personal branding. It's no longer just an image projection that you do to the outside world.
That's right. No, that's exactly right. And so, my first company did educational video games, and outside of learning and programming 6 video games when I was 11, I didn't really know anything about video games, and I was in education, so the investors were like, why should we give you any money for this? And I was like, because you're my mom. That was where you started the conversation, and then you actually built the prototype and showed you could do it, and that built up from there.
Okay, very good. So we'll take your questions. I would just like to ask one last question to the entire panel. Branding has changed over the years. It's become more strategic. It's been moving away from product, right? There was this idea of integrated marketing communications that's still relevant today. There's internal and personal branding more relevant than it was perhaps 20, 30, 40 years ago. But what will be coming next? Okay, what will be the future? I have my own view on it, and it's in this book here, Ideas at Work. I'm basically saying the robots are coming, okay? No more humans being particularly relevant. But what is the panel from? Do you understand? Future of branding.
I think if I was to use one word, experiential. I think brands are like people, they're organic, and as the world evolves, and we all evolve, we're much more experientially oriented, and I think that's what brands will be moving forward.
Okay, Shelly?
I was going to use the same exact word, but I think it's just an extension of integration. It's just that we're getting broader and broader in the way we think about how consumers form brand impressions, and we're starting to understand that it's not 5 things, but it's everything. And it's every interaction with the brand which gets to experience. And it just is not something that people have paid that much attention to.
Well, we'll have a session this afternoon.
Okay.
With me, as a matter of
Okay.
fact, talking about experience. Russell.
Usually, for me, I look at the campaigns and or work that we're doing that's striking a chord in the most recent past as what's going to come next. And I think in the work we just did with REI around Opt Outside, it's about an experience, but it's also about a core value and how that gets caught on in an authentic way. And so I think that it's either that or the kind of work we do with Activision in the, sort of as you're going from one generation, 12 million users to the next, how do you embed something in that is an experience, but that's an entertainment. So it's that authenticity and also something useful that's going to entertain people.
So I think there are 4 components. I think that experiential is definitely one of them. I think social is a big component. I get, my recommendations from my friends. Authentic, because everything, has been cookie cutter to date. The more that you get authenticity, and then connected. And this is something that we see a lot where a lot of consumers these days are asking, what does your brand mean? What is it connected to? Is it connected to something greater than just selling, products? Those 4 components we found determined.
And indeed, these 4 components are absolutely critical for what is nowadays referred to as these sort of indie businesses, right? Against the mainstream, so
that's right.
Finding your identity, your own values through those smaller brands. And we will have a session on that tomorrow morning as well. Good. So let's take your questions. Please identify yourself as saying who you would like to answer the question from the panelists that we have here, and then give us your question as well, of course.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Johnston. I work in an agency called Agenda. My question is to Shelly and Russell mainly. Just wanted to hear, following the conversation about the future of branding, future of brands, just your thoughts around the future of agencies in that. I really love the quote that you gave us before, Shelly. I just tweeted it around different people available to people in agencies. But I just wonder how you imagine that environment changing, given your predictions about brand changes.
Well, I think it's the end of silos. There has to be the end of silos. There is no sort of advertising department and public relations department, and it's just, these are groups of people who come together and think creatively about brands. And I think the other thing is the need for to be nimble and fast, because as fast as the media environment's changing, the opportunities that are available to any brand today, sort of increase every week. Places you never thought you could communicate or ways you could communicate are happening. So you sort of need a nimble group of people who are comfortable with ambiguity, who are happy when things change. You know what I'm saying, because we all deal with people who have problems with these things. And who are flexible enough and collaborative enough to work together in teams of people to get to a goal.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the things that we've been looking at was, first of all, as an agency, when we're interviewing people, I'd say if you're looking to be somewhere comfortable, don't join here. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and we're always looking at sort of a rapid incremental change. And you only get that by learning across the sets of industries and sets of brands and from your clients. And so I do think, the future of the agency is this nimbleness that Shelly spoke of, and the ability to, as we talk about, sort of both help a brand evolve, help it promote itself, but also protect. And you've got to move across those 3 with great agility.
Okay, I saw a couple of hands up here. Why don't we go?
Yep.
Okay, all right, let's first go to the back and then we'll come down.
Quick question regarding branding, marketing, and the national primary. Do you see parallels with what's going on in this election season in the primaries with some of your experiences between different brands?
Okay, now the discussion gets heated.
I have an immediate reaction, which is if you look at it, I happen to believe that with NT that authenticity is absolutely critical today. And I do believe that one of the primary drivers of for both supporters of Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump is people who respond to authenticity. That you may like them or not like them, but they are who they are. And everybody else seems so packaged relative to them that I think that's one of the primary things that's driving the appeal.
I have a thought. Would you say crime? Primary.
Crime.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, got it. I was like, wow, I didn't thought about that. But I did have a response to, immediately Donald Trump came out. What was fascinating to me was I was like, this guy is like, he's like the internet business of politicians. Because I assumed everything at the beginning was, I'm going to sell you, it's vaporware. I'm going to sell you on what I believe I can build, and then I assumed that somewhere behind he's going to find a whole bunch of really smart people to actually fill in the policy components. And so at the very beginning, it was like how Oracle started with Larry Ellison. He said, yeah, we can build that, ran back and figured out how to build it. So all the way along, I was watching Trump, and I was like, this is like the internet business of politicians. I still haven't seen like the actual policies, but but it's very fascinating from a branding perspective because the noise, overrode the substance, and it was very much like internet businesses.
Right.
What?
And businesses take time to build, although less and less, right?
It's true.
I would say if we look at the candidates as brands, I would say Donald Trump came in as the disruptor. In many ways, his approach is antithetical to politicians, and he actually obviously found a responsive chord among people with a lot of anger and people who are disenfranchised, and other people who would like to just shake things up.
Yeah, I think we've been studying trust for the last 16 years, and this year we saw the greatest gap in trust between an informed public and the mass public that we've ever seen, not just in the U.S., globally. So it showed that this yawning gap created a vacuum, that someone who could project strength to those who are disenfranchised had a big window to walk through.
Okay, great brand analysis for a terrific question. Would we have the microphone? Okay, first here, and then we go in the middle.
I have a question for the panel in general around globalization. I have a destination brand, Greece, goes through a financial crisis, then goes through the refugee crisis. So while it's not specific to a destination brand, at what point does Coach in the past become a global brand? At what point do you think you might grow globally? So I guess the general question is, are all the brands of tomorrow global? Do they have to be global?
Since Coach was mentioned, Lou, when did it become a global brand?
Well, to answer your very specific last question, brands do not need to be global to be successful. I do think when you start a business, and let's call it a branded business, you really need to be very focused on one or two major geographies that you know very well. To the extent you can establish your brand easily and quickly in those geographies, then you can look to replicate them in other geographies. But many of the biggest brands in the world, such as new brands, such as Alibaba, is still primarily a Greater China brand.
So of course, having a huge market.
Still a market, but it's still just part of the puzzle.
So I have an interesting response to that. There were two experiences that I had. One was recently I was at a conference called Summit at Sea, and as part of this thing, it's like you take over a ship and you bring a whole bunch of like tech people. And Eric Schmidt was one of the speakers. He was speaking with Travis from Uber, and he talked about the idea that you actually have to think globally when you start a company these days from the beginning almost. And I'm a part of a group called the Henry Crown Group at the Aspen Institute. One of my classmates, a guy named Reed Hoffman, who started LinkedIn. And he's now teaching a course at Stanford called Blitzscaling. And the idea of Blitzscaling is that, especially with companies that that are starting in the internet era, etc., the speed with which someone else can come in and create a better mousetrap is actually so fast that from a product perspective, from a personnel perspective, from a global perspective, you actually have to be thinking about that almost immediately, find product to market fit. And so for us, we're already thinking about that. And it's something that we think about because defenses, barriers to entry, aren't necessarily as high as they once were, if it's an internet company.
I do find, for us, some of the companies we work with that are in that hyper growth, they're going to multi-markets much faster than before. Now, they're not going global. They're going to UK, Germany, Australia. They're picking sets of markets where they see the greatest receptivity, not like in, say 10 years ago, we're working for big multinationals who did full-on global programs. Most of those programs are now getting multi-market. What's global is the crisis response. So that something that happens in a particular market, if you're not ready, if you're not monitoring, if you don't know how you're going to respond to that as a company or as a brand, that can travel super fast. But that we're doing more localization of a lot of our programs than maybe 5 years ago for the major brands.
Okay. Next question, please.
So we work in the scuba industry, and the whole industry right now seems to be having an identity crisis. So my question is, have you seen something like that before in similar industries, and how that kind of worked itself out, or if somebody championed the entire industry itself?
Industries as brands, perhaps, right?
You said the scuba industry?
Right, to be specific.
What's the...
Tell us what you do.
So I'm a retailer, and he's the manufacturer, and we work together. And we're just seeing a lot of, the industry has been declining for a while now, and it's kind of been transitioning from the older generation where it was more of a high-risk sport to now it's kind of becoming more of a family sport. And we're just seeing a lot of competition within the industry that's competing on what's the right way to go and stuff. And it seems to be kind of muddying what people in general look at the industry and see the whole activity itself. So I guess just any thoughts on where you've maybe seen that kind of thing happen before, and if you've seen it work itself?
It happens everywhere. So you need to get ahead of it. You need to really understand where your consumers are, where target consumers are today, where they're traveling tomorrow, and I would suggest you need to make a real giant leap so you can get ahead of it, because from what you said, you're behind it today.
So I think that the way that I would look at it is, are you seeing a decline in the number of people booking scuba experiences? Are you seeing a difference in the way that competitors are marketing it? So for example, there was never a decline in reading books. Amazon just came along, and there was a decline in buying it from like Barnes and Nobles and Borders, but people were still buying books. So if you're seeing a decline in the number of people doing scuba diving, then you want to look at sort of ancillary industries and seeing whether or not they're choosing to spend their leisure time elsewhere. If you're seeing other competitors who are marketing it differently, then you might have like a brand and approach problem. So it's not clear to me just yet.
Okay, maybe we can pass the microphone to the left over here. Yes.
I'm an agency from Stamford, Connecticut. We're pioneering an idea of inbound journalism. And I'm wondering, in a world where brand is often compared to the opposite of lead generation, what's your take on brand and lead generation coexisting or complementing each other?
So I'd love to talk on this subject. So I have never and I'm old now, so in my whole professional career, I have never seen a product sell more on its own versus when it's presented in the context of a brand. A product presented in the context of a larger idea of a brand always sells more, and that's despite the fact that product managers always want to give you the speeds, and you can keep proving it over and over again. It'll work. So any experiment you want to do will show that, and I think it's increasingly true rather than less true. I think people really do care about who it is who's manufacturing the product that they're buying. So I think nothing drives products like brand. I also recall once asking the chief operating officer of Nike how they think about dividing their budgets between product advertising and brand advertising. And he said something startling. He said, "Oh, we don't have any brand advertising. Every single piece of communication they do is behind the product. But the Nike brand so infuses every product that they sell that you can't make the distinction. And that, to me, is nirvana. That is the ideal state of the world."
I
think the place that we're seeing the sort of lead gen focus with brand emerging most right now, even in like the last year, is in the B2B space. So you see a lot, we have an offer we call collaborative journalism, where you take some ex-editorial directors, some brand strategists, and folks who come out of analytics from Huffington Post and the like, and then you look at the customer journey and your thinking, and you create thoughtful content that you might get in the past from a McKinsey quarterly BCG type, but it's around a tech company or some other B2B product, and you can bring someone sort of through that journey and track them in new ways. So I do think that that's something that's definitely emergent, where how are you provoking a thought, how are you engaging them in a dialogue that moves them into lead gen that's next to sales, which is something that we wouldn't have done probably 3 years ago.
We have time for one last question. Maybe we can have it here in the middle. You've had your hand up for a long, long time. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Margaret Malloy from branding agency Siegel and Gale. About 2 years ago, there was a seminal piece in the New Yorker entitled Twilight of the Brands. And as I recall, the premise of the article was brands were born in an era when there was little information, and a brand essentially was a proxy for quality. In today's era, there is plenty of information, and the article asserts that brands are no longer relevant. How do you react to that piece?
Okay, so the future of branding is the end of brand. How do you like that, Shelly?
I just don't believe it's true. I mean, so one of the things about brands that people, sort of just skip over is brands help you edit. I mean, as a consumer, how could you possibly make a decision across, there are hundreds and thousands of offerings these days of anything. And I think that the very ability to sort of narrow your choices based on brands it's a basic utility, I think, that brands afford. And in a world where there are more and more choices, I think we have more and greater need for brands.
I'm sure you like that answer because you're basically also from a brand agency, right? But anybody on the panel wants to disagree?
Not disagree, but build on that. I would never disagree with Shelly. What I do think is happening though is that before brands could get away with like a big umbrella story, and these days it's more about how do you connect to me as the consumer. I don't believe you when you say blah, like connect with me here. So brands have actually gotten smaller, and the focus on the connection in the story drives that loyalty. So I think it's just as important. I think it's just on a more micro.
You have to be really relevant.
You have to be relevant. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you very, very much. I'd like to thank all the panelists for Lumber. And that was the session on the past and future of branding.